The envelope skimmed across the polished walnut table with a soft scrape, the kind of sound that seems harmless until you realize it has shifted the ground beneath your feet. Inside lay a check for $500,000. Lawrence Whitmore wore a satisfied smile, the look of a man convinced he had just erased an inconvenience with ink and authority. What he didn't realize was that the person sitting opposite him, the one he assumed he could buy and discard, quietly held the power to dismantle nearly half of everything he had built. My name is Daniel Reed, and this is how I watched my wife's family attempt to erase me while their financial future rested squarely in my hands. For 3 years, I had been married to Claire Whitmore, the only daughter of one of Chicago's most celebrated property magnates. And for those same 3 years, I allowed her family to believe I was unremarkable, a mildly successful data consultant who had somehow charmed their daughter into marrying beneath her proper station. I let them believe it because I wanted to see who they truly were when they thought I had no leverage. The truth was far different. Quietly, patiently, I had accumulated enough ownership in Whitmore Urban Group to remove Lawrence from his own boardroom with a single vote. But I kept my silence. I watched. I waited. The invitation arrived midweek. Claire slid her phone toward me as we ate breakfast, her expression already guarded. It was a message from her mother, Eleanor. "Dinner this Friday," Claire said softly. "Just us." She says it's important. In the Whitmore household, important never meant good news. It meant confrontation wrapped in fine china. It meant Lawrence had decided it was time to address what he considered an embarrassment, his daughter's marriage to a man who drove an aging sedan and lived in an apartment smaller than his pool house. "Sounds fascinating," I replied calmly, already predicting where the night would lead. Claire frowned. "Maybe we shouldn't go. When they get like this, it's never accidental." She was right. Over the years, their disapproval had arrived in fragments. Eleanor reminiscing loudly about Claire's ex, a hedge fund prodigy, Lawrence explaining basic business principles to me at family gatherings, seating arrangements that quietly reminded me where I ranked. I was always tolerated, never respected. "We're going," I said. "Whatever they want to say, they'll say it whether we're there or not." What Claire didn't know, what no one knew beyond my lawyer and financial advisors, was that Daniel Reed was also the sole owner of a private investment entity that had been acquiring Whitmore Urban Group shares since the aftermath of the financial crisis. I had been 24, fresh out of graduate school, armed with a quantitative finance degree and a modest inheritance from my grandfather. While others splurged, I studied. I found a real estate firm drowning not because it lacked value, but because it lacked discipline. Lawrence Whitmore needed capital. I gave it to him, quietly, anonymously, relentlessly. By the time I met Claire at a charity gala years later, I already owned nearly a third of her father's company. By the time we married, that number had climbed past 40%. On the night of that dinner, it stood at 47. Friday evening arrived cool and bright, the city wearing its autumn polish. Claire changed outfits more times than she'd admit, trying to strike a balance between defiance and diplomacy. I wore slacks and a simple button-down, exactly what Lawrence expected of me. Their home loomed over manicured grounds in Highland Park, elegant and imposing, more monument than residence. Claire squeezed my hand as we approached the door. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "I chose you." Eleanor answered personally, her smile precise and controlled. Lawrence waited at the head of the dining table in a tailored suit, as if hosting a board meeting rather than a family meal. The early conversations stayed polite. Claire spoke about her nonprofit work. Lawrence mentioned new developments. I listened, nodded, asked harmless questions. Then, as dessert plates were cleared, Lawrence produced a leather folder and placed it deliberately on the table. "Daniel," he said, voice smooth with rehearsed authority, "we want to talk about Claire's future." Claire stiffened. Her fingers tightened around mine. Eleanor dabbed her lips. "Our daughter has made sacrifices. Financially, socially. We can't ignore that." Lawrence opened the folder. Inside lay paperwork and the check. "We believe this is the cleanest solution," he said. "An annulment. No scandal. No bitterness. You walk away with financial security. Claire regains the life she deserves. Silence filled the room. Claire stood abruptly, furious, humiliated. You can't buy people, she snapped. Lawrence barely glanced at her. His eyes stayed on me. You understand how the world works. Sometimes money is the most honest language. I studied the check, then looked up calmly. Before I respond, I need to make a call. I dial my attorney and put the phone on speaker. Within moments, the facts were laid bare. Share counts, percentages, ownership. When my attorney stated plainly that I was the largest shareholder in Whitmore Urban Group, the room went still. Eleanor's face drained of color. Lawrence's confidence collapsed into disbelief. I don't understand, he muttered. You didn't need to, I replied. As long as the money kept coming. I stood, meeting his gaze evenly. Every major project you credit yourself for over the past decade exists because of capital I supplied. You built ambition. I built sustainability. Claire stared at me, stunned. You knew all along. I knew what I could do, I said gently. I wanted to know who they were. Lawrence tried to speak, to bargain, to reclaim authority that no longer belonged to him. It was too late. I had already requested an emergency board meeting. His removal was procedural now, not personal. As the night unraveled, I turned back to Claire, regret softening my voice. I should have told you sooner, I said. I was trying to protect you from exactly this moment. She stepped closer, tears in her eyes, not of pain, but clarity. Next time, she said quietly, we face them together. And we did.